Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to let you in on a little secret. It's like a decoder ring for understanding pretty much any text, from ancient scriptures to today's headlines. It's a tool that shows you the hidden conversation happening just under the surface of the words. And to show you how this works, let's just dive right in with a piece of text that I can almost guarantee you've heard before, probably in a very specific, very happy setting. Yup, of course. These are some of the most famous words ever written about love. We hear them at weddings constantly, right? They're held up as the absolute gold standard for what a partnership should be. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, and it seems to stand on its own perfectly. It really feels like it was written for these moments, doesn't it? Like a timeless, standalone poem about the very nature of love. But what if it wasn't? What if I told you that when these words were first put to paper, they weren't for a celebration at all? Nope, they were a correction, dropped right into the middle of a massive argument.
So, the original audience for this letter, a church in a city called Corinth, was, to put it mildly, a mess. They were totally divided. You had wealthier members using these impressive spiritual gifts, like speaking in tongues, basically to show off and claim they were better than everyone else. It was creating cliques and just tearing the whole community apart. So the Apostle Paul writes them this letter, and right smack in the middle of telling them how to use their gifts, he drops this entire chapter on love.
So here's the kicker. This wasn't some philosophical reflection on the idea of love. It was a practical, hands-on solution to a very real problem. Paul was basically saying, hey, if you actually loved each other this way, in a way that isn't proud or self-seeking, you would use your gifts to build everyone up, not just to make yourselves look good. Love was the how-to manual for fixing their broken community. And this one example blows the lid off an incredibly powerful tool for understanding, well, pretty much anything. It's called literary context, and it really is like a secret decoder ring that unlocks what a text is truly about. It's this simple but profound idea that no sentence just floats around by itself. The words and paragraphs around it give it a specific job to do in the author's bigger argument. So the key question we should ask isn't just what does this text say? The real question is, what is this text doing? And figuring out what a text is doing is actually pretty simple. You just have to ask yourself three basic questions. First, how does this section connect to what I just read? Second, how is it setting up what's coming next? And third, if I just took this part out, what would be lost? What crucial piece of the puzzle would be missing? Okay, so here's where it gets really fun, because this tool, this idea of context, it solves puzzles that have had people scratching their heads for centuries. Let's look at 3 quick case studies where context just changes everything. First up, Moses in the book of Exodus. One minute, he's this superhero parting the Red Sea, and then, suddenly, the text shows him as so weak and overwhelmed he can't even hold his own arms up in a battle. It feels like a really weird character shift, right? So, why the change? Well, context gives us the answer. See, right before this scene, the people of Israel are complaining, and they literally ask the question, is the Lord among us or not? Now, the author doesn't just come out and say, yes. Instead, he shows us Moses failing. The whole point isn't that Moses is weak. The point is that he's too weak to be the reason they're winning their battles. Therefore, God must be with them. The story of Moses' weakness is the author's brilliant answer to the people's question. All right, next puzzle. The Gospel of Matthew. If you just read it straight through, it can feel like a kind of jumbled collection of Jesus' teachings and miracles. But literary context shows us there's an absolutely brilliant and deliberate structure at play. So here's what Matthew does. Think of it like a sandwich. At the end of chapter 4, he gives you the top bun, a quick summary saying Jesus went around preaching and healing. Then, for the next 5 chapters, you get the filling. Chapters 5 to 7 are a huge example of his preaching, the Sermon on the Mount. Then, chapters 8 and 9 are a collection of his healing miracles. And then, to cap the whole thing off, at the end of chapter 9, he gives you the bottom bun. He repeats that summary statement almost word for word. It's a perfect literary sandwich. Okay, one last puzzle. This one's from the book of Revelation. Chapter 6 ends on what has to be one of the most terrifying cliffhangers in all of literature, right as it's describing the end of the world. The whole world is collapsing, and the chapter just leaves you hanging with this haunting, seemingly unanswerable question. Who can possibly survive this? But here's the thing, it's not unanswerable at all. In fact, if you just turn the page, the very first thing chapter 7 does is answer the question. It describes a whole group of people who are sealed and protected by God. The answer was hiding in plain sight in the very next sentence. So context isn't just helpful, sometimes it's literally where the answer is. All right, so these are fascinating ancient puzzles for sure. But why does any of this really matter to us today as we're trying to navigate our own world of endless information? Because understanding context is a superpower. Seriously. When you see a shocking headline or a politician's soundbite taken out of a longer speech, asking, wait, what came before this? Or what's the bigger argument here? Protects you from being misled. It's the tool that helps you see an author's actual point, not just an isolated quote. It is the essential critical thinking skill for the 21st century.
Paying attention to context is what takes us from being just passive consumers of information to being active, critical thinkers who can actually grasp the real message. It's about understanding the whole conversation, not just hearing a few of the words.
And that leaves us with a really provocative final thought. If a text as famous, as universally known as love is patient, love is kind can be so widely misunderstood, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else might you have been reading out of context all along?